Most of us are familiar with the most famous elements of history, no matter what specifics we were taught in school. But it doesn't always occur to us that there may be photographic evidence of some of history's most eye-opening events and situations, particularly as we tend to associate great on-the-spot photography with the modern era of instant cameras and smartphones. Here are some remarkable pictures of historic scenes, frozen in time and captured forever. Number 20. The SS Normandy keels over. On February 9, 1942, the SS Normandy caught fire and then capsized at Pier 88 in New York. Originally constructed in France, the ocean liner was one of the most powerful and largest ever built. But after being seized by the US during World War II, her eventual fate was less than glamorous. Indeed, the Normandy was salvaged, but then it was thought that restoring her would be too expensive. She was scrapped in 1946. Number 19. Fishermen blow their own belugas. You'll notice from this eye-opening photo that it's no normal catch in which these Russian fishermen are taking an immense pride. Nope, these whoppers are belugas, the biggest freshwater fish in the world, famed for being a prime source of caviar. This particular haul was brought ashore and photographed for posterity, lest any other angler disbelieved the catch on the Volga River in 1924. Number 18. Surfs up in the Roaring '20s. Surfing wasn't always as glamorous as it is now. Evidently, back in the 1920s, square wooden boards and bathing suits made from wool, probably to act as protection from splinters, were all the rage. You would think as much, judging from this picture taken in 1922. And these adventurous surfers are shot on a beach, not in California, but in the seaside town of Perranporth in Cornwall, England. Number 17. Boy pictures the future. While we struggle to turn our heads these days without encountering a screen of some sort, back in the 1940s, television sets were just beginning to find their way into people's homes. Is it little wonder then that this young boy is so transfixed by seeing a TV in a shop window in 1948? We can't make out which Kardashian is on screen and reflected on the inside of the shop's window, however. Number 16. James Naismith gives birth to basketball. It's not often that a sport can be attributed to one person. The collective roots of soccer, for instance, can be traced all the way back to ancient civilization. But the credit for the birth of basketball can certainly be claimed by one individual. In 1891, a then 30-year-old James Naismith literally wrote the rulebook for the sport, before going on to found a basketball program at the University of Kansas. Here he is teaching his wife with the rudiments of the game in 1928. Number 15. How Margaret Hamilton climbed to the moon. Technology's come a long way since the 1960s. The Apollo rocket that sent men to the moon, for instance, was no more powerful than a pocket calculator. Nevertheless, it did require an extensive and ingenious guidance program. Here it is pictured towering alongside its author, lead NASA software engineer Margaret Hamilton in 1969, the same year that Neil Armstrong and crew made history on the moon. Number 14. Hockey players lensed looking for a lens. Spot the puck? No, but few displays of true sportsmanship can match this scene from 1962. In fairness, players from both the Toronto Maple Leafs and Chicago Blackhawks halted this game during the Stanley Cup Finals. It was also both sides could search for a player's lost contact lens. Even the referee got involved. Number 13. Animal antics alleviate anxiety. Back in the 1950s, Michigan's University Hospital had a special program for its sick children, animal therapy. By the time it was pictured here in 1956, the initiative had already been a success for 30 years. The animals helped the hospital's child patients recover, assisting the minors by alleviating their anxiety, stress, and pain. Number 12. Giving bulletproof vests a shot. If standing in the street taking turns at shooting at one another sounds like an odd way to spend your time, that's because it is. However, that's exactly what some hardy men had to do in the 1920s. This is when the first bulletproof vests were designed, and after all, the invention had to be tested somehow. Here are two brave testers taking a vested interest in 1923. We're just glad they worked. Number 11. Original Ronald McDonald scares up some customers. McDonald's mascot may not be as terrifying as Pennywise the Clown, but there's still something creepy about Willard Scott's creation. In particular, the clown's original 1960s version of Ronald McDonald, pictured here, is totally unnerving. It would surely have shaken the milk out of terrified kids rather than persuaded them to consume McDonald's milkshakes. Number 10. The Berlin Wall as a building site. For 28 years, the Berlin Wall divided the now German capital along ideological lines, the Communist East and Capitalist West. The structure's fall in 1989 is one of the major historical events of the late 20th century. Pictured here is its hasty construction in August of 1961 by the German Democratic Republic. The regime claimed to have planned the wall as an anti-fascist measure to keep out conspirators in West Berlin. Number 9. Making time for war literature. The 8 months and 5 days that London endured intensified bombing from the Nazis in 1940 to 1941 became known as the Blitz. Luftwaffe air raids destroyed and damaged countless buildings in England's capital. Among those was the bookstore pictured above in October 1940, where a boy sits in the debris enjoying a free read. Ironically, the title he's reading is The History of London. Number 8. Really spraying something. In many ways, the past was more advanced than the present. Just look at this suntan vending machine, for instance, which could be found as far back as 1949. Nowadays, you'd have to visit a tanning salon or resort to fake tan in a bottle. Surely that's the opposite of progress. Sadly, being shot in black and white, we can't judge how orange the customer is. Number 7. Martin Luther King Roots Out Evil. As figurehead of the civil rights movement in the US, it's little surprise that Martin Luther King Jr. was targeted by the evil of the Ku Klux Klan. On one such occasion in April 1960, the white supremacist group shamefully burned crosses outside the homes of black Atlanta citizens, including MLK's. A pressman was on hand to photograph this powerful image as King removes the offending object while his son watches on. Number 6. Putting Victoria-era prosthetics through their paces. You may think artificial or prosthetic limbs are a modern invention, dreamt up in science fiction and only realized in the past decade or two. But as far back as the late 19th century, craftsmen such as English James Gillingham were beginning to see the potential in artificial limbs. In this shot, taken circa 1890, a child recipient strikes a pose. In fact, Gillingham had built prosthetics for a whopping 15,000 patients by 1910. Number 5. The shameful face of post-war poverty. It's little wonder that this Chicago mother felt so ashamed that she hid her face from the camera's lens. Reportedly, she'd just put her children up for sale. Most astonishingly, this heartbreaking scene happened as recently as 1948, pointing to the abject misery and poverty many American citizens endured at this time. Number 4. Spectacular results from atomic bomb test. Atomic bomb testing was still being conducted in the Nevada desert in 1953. Here, a mother and son innocently watched the awesome but terrible sight of a mushroom cloud grow in the neighborhood. Presumably, if they hang around long enough, they'll also get to see Indiana Jones hurtling through the sky in a flying fridge. Number 3. High times in the Middle East. Prior to its hardline Islamic Revolution of 1979, Iran was a surprisingly forward-thinking and modern place to live. In the 1960s and 70s, mullets, flares, pop music, and Western cars were hip and trendy with Iranian youth. So too was some very unconservative and distinctly groovy beachwear, as sported by this carefree young woman in 1960. Sadly, it's impossible to conceive of this image being recreated in the Iran of today. Number 2. oldest player in the theater of war. From the late 1980s to the mid-90s, the Nagorno-Karabakh War raged through Azerbaijan, which sits astride Europe and Asia. It represented a war of liberation for ethnic Armenians who lived in the country, and it saw up to 30,000 people died. Here, a 106-year-old Armenian woman is pictured sitting guard outside her home in 1990, determined not to become a statistic. Number 1. Sad reality behind Winnie the Pooh and Christopher Robin. Dramatized in the 2017 movie Goodbye Christopher Robin, the true story of the child whose teddy bear inspired Winnie the Pooh is more than a little melancholy. As he grew up, the real-life Christopher came to resent his author father, A.A. Milne, for, as the son saw it, exploiting his history. Pictured here in the late 1920s are Christopher and Pooh sharing an innocent moment. Check out these other videos from Let Me Know. If you haven't made the move to subscribe to our channel, all you need to do is click on that red subscribe button. Thank you for watching.